How are you?
Good,
All
good to
right.
see you.
Nice to see you.
It's not live or anything like that. This is so.
Like 5 people might see it or 1, but don't worry about that. We take it off right away. Hi, I'm Jane Velez-Mitchell with Jane Unchained, and we have breaking news from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine and its leader, Dr. Neal Barnard, about an extraordinary development for animals just like little Rico here. So, straight out to Dr. Neal Barnard of PCRM. What's the latest, Dr. Neal?
Hi there, Jane. As you know, we've been working long and hard to change what medical schools are doing. This will curl your hair a little bit, I got to tell you. Back in the 70s when I was in medical school, one day they said, next week is dog lab. Close your dog's ears. What they do is they will take dogs, tape them down to the table, and give them drugs and ultimately kill them. And the idea is to try to teach medical students how drugs affect animals. But what they're really teaching is cruelty. So as soon as I got out of medical, well, first of all, I should tell you I refused to participate in that laboratory, and it didn't hold me back at all. But as soon as I got into medical practice, I decided I didn't want anybody to be participating in these cruel laboratories like that. In the United States, there are 127 medical schools where you can get an MD degree. And we started showing them how to do the alternatives, how to replace the use of animals, whether it's with simulators or going into the hospital to do apprenticeships. There's all kinds of ways of doing it. Well, we've, over the years, managed to knock that number down from 127 medical schools. 123 of them stopped using the animals. However, that left 4. And the 4 were kind of the most intransigent, and the one that we were particularly concerned about was the University of Mississippi. And we leafleted, we put up billboards, we did all kinds of things to try to get the attention of the university, and they basically seem to be digging their heels in. But Jane, persistence furthers. Last week we got a letter from the university saying, effectively, you're right. Up until then, they had been using animals to teach medical students physiology. The animals were always killed. It happened year after year after year, and they finally decided, enough. They stopped, and that's it. So now you could get your MD degree at that medical school, just like every other, without harming any animals. That's the good news. But Jane, I've got some bad news, and that is what that really means is there are 3 medical where if you're a medical student going through, at some point the instructors are going to say, next week, it's the animal lab, get ready, and before the afternoon is done, those students will have killed their first patients. That should not be that way. We're going to stop that.
I want to get to those other schools, but let's celebrate the victory first. Donnie Moss of theirturn.net. No, the medical credo is first do no harm. So to teach these doctors to desensitize them, to teach them to kill, is, in my mind, the antithesis of what medical schools should be teaching. So I think this is a huge victory to get one of these holdout schools to change its mind.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Donnie.
Oh, you go ahead.
I was going to say it's a huge change, and in some cases it was really a challenge. In other cases over the years it's been relatively easy. Harvard Medical School, arguably the best in the country. A number of years ago, the medical students came down here and they said, Dr. Barnard, we've got this dog lab. We don't want to do it. We want to stop this. And I flew to Boston. I met with the instructor. And you know what we did? We brought the students into the human operating room, not to practice surgery on people, but first to just observe. So they were seeing exactly the same things that they were seeing in dogs. Instead, they could see it in an actual surgical situation. The students loved it. And Harvard then worked with us to spread this message to other schools. But there have been some that have been really tough. University of Colorado, there had to be a lawsuit brought by one of the students who we were supporting in order to get rid of this. But Mississippi, they were tough, but now they are on the good list.
And I just want to say one thing, because we are going to edit this. Try not to touch your computer, because you're fabulous. You have almost like a movie quality image, but when you move it, when you touch the computer, it's jiggling.
Okay, you bet.
Yeah. Donnie Moss of theirturn.net, how significant of a victory is this?
I mean, each and every school that stops performing live, tests on live animals for training purposes, I mean, it's a victory for every single one of those animals, and we have PCRM to thank what's so remarkable is that this approach to teaching is so antiquated. It's so medieval. Why would, and I guess this is a question for Dr. Barnard, why would any medical school want to use an antiquated approach when human simulators are available?
You know, Donnie, I completely agree with you, but I would go further. Antiquated sort of implies that at one point it might have been appropriate. And I have to say, I don't think it was ever appropriate. There were always better ways to teach. You don't have to kill a dog or any other animal in order to be a decent physician. But to answer your question more directly, you know, when you train in a certain way yourself, you kind of think when you're an instructor that that's the way other people ought to be trained. So a lot of these physicians trained on dogs themselves, and they figured, well, I went through it, you're going to go through it. And then when the public started to complain, you know what they did? They would say, well, let's switch to an unpopular species.
Oh.
So, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. So they'd say, we won't use a dog, we'll give you a pig. But that pig is dead and in a trash bag, just like a dog. Or let's use a goat or some other animal that the public won't worry about. But we felt that it really doesn't matter what species they're killing. They've got to get away from it, both for the animal standpoint, but also you don't want a doctor who practiced surgical skills on an animal. You want a person who learned as an apprentice, slowly but surely learning human anatomy, and you do that with human simulators and ultimately apprenticing in the human operating room under the watchful eye of your attending physician.
Well, let me ask you, Dr. Barnard, to tell us about the human simulators and how sophisticated they are, because I've seen photographs of some of them, and they certainly replicate what's going on in the human body far better than a pig or, God forbid, a dog or a pig.
Oh, it's amazing. There are many of these available now, and it's impressive. One of them is called Trauma Man. For all of those surgeons in training who are sick of training on a goat or on a pig or on a dog and learning all the wrong anatomy landmarks, Trauma Man is exactly a person. And when you cut into it, it bleeds. All the landmarks are exactly just like human anatomy. But the especially good thing about it is, apart from the fact that you're saving animals, is that with these simulators, you can use them over and over and over and over until you're really good at it. If you do it with a dog one afternoon, that's it. You don't get the repetition that you really need.
And say that again if you do it with a dog, because you kind of froze up at that 1 second.
Okay. With these human simulators, you can use them over and over and over so that you can become very proficient at the procedures. But if you're doing it on a dog, you've done it once, the dog is dead in a trash bag, and you don't get any further practice, obviously. So it's not just inhumane, it's bad education.
And Donnie Moss of TheirTurn.net, you and I are working very hard on an issue involving monkeys being bred for experimentation and surgeries being performed on monkeys, removing their fetuses, C-sections. It's a huge controversy down in Hendry County. What do you make of this advance, and how does it relate to other controversies involving the increasingly controversial use of animals in experimentation?
Look, I think each time that there's a victory like the one at the University of Mississippi, it makes the news and it opens people's eyes to the issue of animal testing. And I guess I have another question for Dr. Barnard, and that is, I'd be curious to know, have the universities that have eliminated the use of live animals in training, have you had success getting some of these same universities to eliminate all animal research in their laboratories?
You know, I'm glad you raised that, because the use of animals in training is different from their use in research. And the use in research is somewhat different in a number of ways. And it's important that we address that too, and we are doing that. We are seeing more and more areas where the alternatives are coming in, but I got to tell you, there is a huge number of animals still used in research. By the way, I do want to also give you something that you can do right now, or that all of your listeners and viewers will do, if you would, and that is, next on our list of schools that we're concerned about is in Baltimore, Johns Hopkins University. It's an excellent medical school, one of the top of the list, but you know what? They still use live animals to teach medical students. Now, when we've asked, why are you doing this? The instructor said, well, some of the students who went through it and they actually killed animals in the course of the afternoon. They said it gave them a sense for the sanctity of life. I'm not making this up. I am not making this up. This is what they said. And our feeling is that you don't get a sense of the sanctity of life from killing an animal, eating bacon, or doing any of these silly things. Instead, you get a sense of the sanctity of life by learning not to kill and to save a human life. That's what it teaches you. So if anybody would like to help us with this, please go to our website, pcrm.org, and there will be a link where you can let Johns Hopkins University know that you want them to improve their teaching. That'll give a reprieve to the animals, and it'll make better doctors tomorrow.
So if you had to say one thing when we contact Johns Hopkins University, what do we say to the university specifically?
What we should say is eliminate the use of animals from your curriculum and use human-relevant teaching methods. That they know exactly what that is. It's hotly controversial at Johns Hopkins right now. There are a lot of people who don't like it, but they have not yet stopped it. And if we don't take action, it's going to happen this year, next year, the year after that. But you know what? If they hear from enough people, I am convinced that they'll give the animals a break and we'll have better physicians tomorrow.
All right, as we wrap up, final thoughts, Donnie Moss.
I know you're going to edit this, so I think we need to ask Dr. Barnard one more question.
Okay, look into the camera.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Barnard, in case Jane needs this for the story, can you tell us what kinds of procedures these medical students perform on live animals in the schools that still do this?
Yeah, in a number of the medical schools, it used to be physiology, where they would give drugs to the animals and then record how it affects their heart, and then they would kill the animals, sometimes by bleeding them out. But the ones that remain, it's all surgery. So in other words, they take the animal on the table, they open them up. Often they will open up the heart cavity so that you can actually see the heart bleeding, and then you can see what it's like when that heart stops and the animal expires.
I want to thank you, Dr. Neal Barnard of the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I want to thank you for taking the time. We will take action. I know that our followers on Facebook and at theirturn.net and at janeunchained.com will move into action quickly so that sentient beings like little Rico here and other dogs and pigs are not tortured for no reason. Tradition is never an excuse for animal abuse. Jane Velez-Mitchell for Jane Unchained. Now, I want to ask you one other question we can insert into a story. This monkey breeding facility, this huge controversy over monkey facilities in Hendry County, Florida. There's a huge as part of this huge controversy over monkey breeding facilities in Hendry County, Florida, it's been learned, local news station broke this story, Wink TV, that at one facility, Primate Products, they were doing C-section surgeries, abortions on monkeys, and removing the fetuses, and then vacuum packing the fetuses and selling the body parts. And the company claims that this is usage, that this does not qualify as experimentation because in the zoning regulations, they're banned from doing experimentation. First of all, what's your reaction to those kinds of procedures, Dr. Barnard?
I have to say I'm very troubled by it in several ways. The obvious thing is that none of the results of these monkey experiments are going to be the kind of things that a doctor like me would want to use. It's not good science. But then when you also think about what the animals go through, from being caged to being operated on, in some cases they are artificially inseminated in order to cause pregnancy, and then what goes on when for the unfortunate offspring, as you mentioned, it really is enough that if people actually saw it with their own eyes, they would turn away.
So let me ask you one other question. There are claims, there are indications, and there are allegations that these C-section surgeries on monkeys were being performed not by veterinarians but by vet techs. Your reaction?
You know, one of the dirty little secrets that you will see in animal laboratories is that oftentimes the people who are doing the work are not the kind of people that you would imagine ought to be doing this. If you bring your dog to a veterinarian, you know that a qualified, licensed, trained veterinarian is doing that work. That is not necessarily the case at some of these animal experimentation facilities. And that not only applies for doing the procedures, doing surgery, but also in how the animals are euthanized at the end of the experiments. In some ways, it's done very, very crudely.
Well, but let me just ask you flat out, what is your reaction to word that a facility that calls itself a monkey breeding facility is conducting C-section surgeries on monkeys and removing the fetuses and freeze-drawing the body parts? Do you feel that this still classifies it as a breeding facility that can be zoned agricultural, or do you feel that that is a violation?
It sounds to me like it's a violation because this is all part and parcel of the research process. That's the reason they're doing it, and the investigators really ought to take a very close look at that.
So if they claim that, no, we can still zone this agricultural because it's the county that encouraged all this business that's doing the investigation.
Right.
So it's not exactly an independent investigation. If the county comes back and says, oh, no, nothing to see here, this is just usage, which was a phrase that the owner of the facility used or the president of the facility used, whatever usage means, it sounds like a semantical argument. But what would you say if they said, no, this isn't experimentation?
They're basically treating it as if they're raising eggs or some other agricultural product, and that's all it is. But the fact of the matter is what they're doing would qualify. You think about the procedures. You have people gowning up, taking out scalpels, doing surgical procedures. That's not the kind of thing that would qualify as anything other than the kind of thing that a research biological supply house would be doing.
Donnie, do you have questions for Dr. Barnard about the monkey facility?
I can't think of anything beyond what you just asked. Well, I guess my one question, yes, I do, and that is, Dr. Barnard, how common would it be, or how big of a crime is it that vet techs and not licensed veterinarians are conducting surgical procedures on monkeys?
You would have to look at the laws within that state and how liberal they might be. But obviously the expectation is that if you have a living animal that's being operated on, the person who's got the knife in their hands ought to be educated and ought to be trained and licensed to do that. It shouldn't be somebody who just applied for a position from an ad in the paper. And I'm sorry to say that unqualified people doing surgery in laboratories is much more common than people might suspect.
Well, let me ask you this final question. The same facility is involved in the importation of This same facility is involved in the planned importation of thousands of monkeys to breed them for experimentation. It's a separate company, but they're leasing the land, and they argue to the county, and the county has just treated it as an expansion of this existing company that has gotten embroiled in this controversy over monkey abortions. Do you think that this company should still be allowed to be involved in the importation of thousands of more monkeys to breed them and prep them for experimentation?
I got to tell you, Jane, it's the last thing that we need. It's bad for the animals, obviously, because the trauma that they have in the process is enormous. But also, keep in mind, what is their ultimate goal? Their ultimate goal is to have research that is not relevant to human health. It's all monkey research. And we've learned over and over and over again that the results really are not applying to human biology in the way that we need. So in other words, bad for the animals, bad for the human patients.
Thank you so much, Dr. Neal Barnard. We so appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Great talking to you. And we'll get on Johns Hopkins right away.
All right, let's get him.
Thank you.